Hey YouTube, it's been a while. I have to give my apologies for my messy workspace. I've got a lot of projects in the works. You can see I've got this Les Paul right here that I'm doing my first ever set neck, guitar neck replacement on. So I've got a bunch of steam things. I've got an iron. I've got that steam machine just trying to figure out how to lift the fretboard and remove the neck. I've got that strap back there, which was just a good deal. All it needs is a paint job, so I'll be working on that in the spring when the weather warms up and I can put up my shed. But those guitars are not the guitars we're here about today. So I picked up this Les Paul style guitar. It's a kit guitar that I bought from a kid for about $100. He said all I needed was a nut, so I was just going to put a new nut on, resell it. It turns out it has an awful finish on it. I bought this in the dark. I didn't inspect it well because it was like a 14-year-old kid. I didn't want to be a jerk and lowball him. It turns out he did not build this kit guitar correctly. There's a few problems. He didn't drill the holes in the correct spot for the bridge. They're slightly off. So you can see the low string is way up here, and this one has room for days underneath it. Maybe he drilled those in the right spot, but just didn't set the neck correct. This doesn't look quite flush, so maybe he just set this slightly off center. And I had to remove a lot of glue, and there's still some here. Basically, 14-year-old kid built this guitar crappy. I way overpaid for it at $100. But I watched a video from MusicIsWin, and he has a PRS SE that is half fretless. So this guitar is still playable. I've played it, and it really isn't that bad to play. Obviously you can tell that it was not built correctly, but it doesn't actually affect the playability too much. So since this is basically a throwaway anyway, there's no way I feel like I could resell this responsibly. Someone would end up getting a horrible guitar. I'm going to do the PRS thing and remove half the frets, file down the other frets that I will leave on, and then file down the nut, and then make my own half fretless guitar. So let's get... Alright, so the first thing I did was get the strings out of the way, just loosened them, taped them out of the way. Now I've got this fret remover tool that I use when I refret necks. I'm going to go ahead and just go one by one. And there's going to be some fretboard lift. This was a cheap guitar. Wow, that is a lot of fretboard lift. But basically, when I'm done removing all these frets, I'm going to sand this down, fill these little holes in, these little fret holes with a wood filler, and let it dry, and then sand it down again so it's perfectly flat. I'm just going to do that for all of these. Okay, so there was a lot of wood coming out of here. Probably still okay, but I decided to just go ahead and remove these the proper way by heating them up with a soldering iron before lifting them out. So we'll see if I get better results. Alright, so this fretboard was pretty dry, and I don't know what kind of wood it was made out of, but quite a bit of wood came off with the frets. If I refretted it, almost all of these would be covered up by the new fret material, but I'm not too worried about it. Again, this was basically a throwaway guitar, so once I get some wood filler in here, all these little divots are going to be filled in with wood. It's not going to look great, but the guitar looks like a piece of crap anyway. So yeah, again, I'm not worried. So I'll put in some wood filler. I used Minwax brand of wood filler for almost everything guitar. And then once that dries, I'll sand this down again. In the meantime, I can start getting these frets down a little bit. We want them a lot lower now that it's fretless up here. And then I'll have to start filing down my nut as well, because it's just going to be too tall with how flat these frets are going to be. Alright, so PRS for Tyler's guitar, MusicIsWin. They filled in these holes with epoxy. I use Minwax, wood filler. I use this for a ton of stuff on guitars, and it usually works great for anything I use it for, so I think it'll work well here. So yeah, I just squished it into the holes with my finger. Once it all dries, I'm going to sand it down so that as much of this is back to that darker ebony color as possible. And then I'll just use some fretboard oil, some F1 oil or lemon oil or something to finish it off. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and use my leveling block. I'm going to go ahead and take the 600 grit side. I think that's the roughest. No, 400. And then I'm just going to start filing these frets down. Just get them lower. Okay, in retrospect, I see the wisdom behind using some clear material, like epoxy, instead of wood filler. It feels great. It feels really nice, but you can see where I chipped all the wood when I was pulling frets out. It makes it painfully obvious. Again, though, this is an ugly guitar. I wasn't planning on it ever being a stage beauty, so I'm going to go ahead, tune it up, plug it in, and see what happens. And I have never actually plugged this guitar in. Well, I plugged it into an amp once when I had no strings, just to make sure the pickups all worked, and they did. So I'll be as surprised as you when I plug this in, whether it sucks really bad or whether it is somewhat of a medium success. Alright, it's done. This is my no-name brand, poorly crafted kit guitar. I didn't build the kit guitar, some kid did. And it is half fretless. See, this half has frets, this half has no frets. Full disclaimer, I don't know how to play fretless, but I'm gonna try. So up here, it's just a regular guitar, right? Feels a little weird because I shaved the frets down so low, but pretty much. But once you go up here, it's really slidey. It sounds really weird. Yeah, it's pretty cool. At the end of the day, I think I'll keep it, and I'll almost call it worth the $100 or so I paid for this guitar. It's pretty cool. I don't say, like, don't follow my video as a how-to to do this, but if you have a guitar that you're going to throw away anyway, I'd recommend trying something like this out because it's pretty fun.